The Legion of Doom has aligned and is eager for the power of Perpetua, but the Justice League has other plans. I'm Stan, and welcome to Detail Comics, where we go over comics in detail. This is an irate review, and we're going to be talking about Justice League number 19 from Scott Snyder with art by Jorge Jimenez. And overall, this has been a really trend-setting series for the DC Universe as a whole, and what we saw last issue in Justice League number 18 is Brainiac and Lex Luthor finally teaming up to turn the doorknob and bring power back to Perpetua, but in this issue, we're probably going to get something different, so let's dive in and see what's going on. Since the events of DC's Dark Knight's Metal, No Justice, and now Justice League, Scott Snyder has been crushing the cosmic landscape of DC's universe, and what we start off with in Justice League number 19 is actually an interpretation from Clark Kent, well, really the narration of Scott Snyder, telling us about what a simple point can be, a simple explanation as to what the dimensions are. A single point is just the first dimension, and then as you add width to a line, it's the second, and so on and so forth. And really this is giving you a sense of scope and scale to give you an idea of where this idea is going. It's going to be big as they transverse into the sixth dimension potentially. But as he gets a call from Batman, he flies over to the Wayne Enterprises building that has been set up inside Metropolis, and he flies in, they're having a conversation. Superman, the hopeful person inside the Justice League, is like, these are the things we have to do. When people look at us, they see some sort of, well, wait a minute, why are you firefighters here? Wonder Woman has learned a few spells from Zatanna in her time with the Justice League Dark, and then we get this great single page drawn by Jorge Jimenez which shows us the current members of the Justice League and some of their guests, which include like Starman and Mara, and overall it's just so good to have this team back, and their idea is that they are dealing with things beyond their scope of understanding. So what do? They're going to recruit somebody to help them out, or at least give them information. And who's the person that knows the most about things outside of their own individual dimension and perception? Oh, it'd have to be Mr. Mxyzptlk. But in reality, Mxyzptlk is just like, who's going to save you from the city despite the fact that you're saving the city from me? And he turns the Daily Planet building into this giant monstrosity that bites down into the dome. There's all this great back and forth, these really outlandish moments where we see Mxyzptlk turn Jon Stewart's arm into a boxing glove and give him a clown nose and some light bulbs for ears and all kinds of ridiculous stuff. The traffic inside Metropolis is going to eat people alive as it devours Starman and Mara and Wonder Woman, and then we just see the Daily Planet, Superman holding it at bay, John Jones, Hot Girl, and Batman all wrapped up in its tongue. But that's not the reality of the situation. Instead, this is Martian Manhunter implanting some sort of psychic cycle, if you will, into the head of Mxyzptlk and telling its subconscious that if he is going to utter any single word without understanding where things are going, he's just going to say his name backwards and send himself back to the fifth dimension. Did they just bring him and imprison him to make fun of him? What is really the purpose of summoning a fifth dimensional imp? And while Superman explains that Mxyzptlk isn't actually evil, we get to jump over to the Legion of Doom that's currently in their headquarters, and they're talking about Perpetua. While she still sleeps, while she still needs energy from two other forms of these alternative sources of energy inside the universe from outside the source wall, you can still see planets forming around her neck. She has a phenomenal amount of power, the ability to create the entirety of the multiverse. It's just a matter of time before she's in that position again, and Lex Luthor wants to position the Legion of Doom so that way they can take advantage of that situation. The fifth dimension, according to Scott Snyder, is imagination, and Mxyzptlk is a creation of pure imagination. And imagination inside the multiverse is dying. If you were able to perceive it, you would see that it's in a state of decay, and he points to a spot on his head where he seems to be fading away himself, and everything is pointing to the sixth dimension. So when you take all those things into account, and he shows a little disc of the multiverse as people understand it, and then Jorge Jimenez does this ridiculous double-page splash while Mxyzptlk explains the sequence of events and how everything works inside the multiverse. You've just got to be in awe of the glorious artwork that Jimenez placed in this. We take the two-dimensional flat surface of the multiverse and we expand it vertically inside this spherical thing where you see the birth and the cycling of various multiverses, the World Forge at the center section, the Dark Multiverse at the bottom, Perpetua, the Monitor, the Anti-Monitor, and then the Justice League surrounding this representation, and then the sixth dimension is considered the control room, the penthouse of the multiverse, and that's only accessible by 4 people according to Mxyzptlk: the Monitor, the Anti-Monitor, Perpetua herself, and then the World Forger, who's probably reforming himself currently. But since this sixth dimension is beyond the comprehension of the average mortal person, who could really survive this kind of endeavor? And that's when Mxyzptlk reveals that as a fifth dimensional imp, he is not necessarily necessarily been an adversary to Superman over the years. He's been a guardian angel, infusing him with fifth-dimensional powers so that way possibly he could survive a trip into the sixth dimension. And there's also another imp that's following over Batman. But Superman is insistent. Open a portal to the sixth dimension so that way he can traverse it, try and find the clues that are necessary, and bring about success for the Justice League against the Legion of Doom and Perpetua. They need to reach higher. They need to reach further. They need to take up arms or other people would just give up. So Mxyzptlk conjures up all the energy that he possibly can and creates this kind of cosmic doorway. Because it's an actual doorway that seems to be pulsing with energy from the sixth dimension, Superman looks over the shoulder of everybody, walks in, and then almost immediately afterwards you hear a knock at the door. Older, salt and pepper Superman in this white and gold cape. It's just such a cool representation of Superman compared to some of the more futuristic versions that we've seen in the past. Jorge Jimenez just absolutely crushes this design for him. But as he relays information to the rest of the Justice League, it is a time for them to come to this universe, this single thread that he found amongst billions of possibilities that was going to allow them to win against Perpetua. And Mara and Starman are going to stay behind because the Earth needs watching, and the Justice League jumps forward into this sixth dimension where we see that everything has been won. And it dives into the future landscape where we've seen other versions of these characters before, particularly Batman should catch your eye. But that might not necessarily be the whole story. We see in a black and gray kind of landscape the stumbling of Superman as he reaches out into the darkness and has no ability to find anything anywhere else. And he falls down into this deep crater full of bodies. His eyes glow red as he sees his surroundings for the first time, and there's just hundreds, if not thousands, of other Supermen that are there lying in the ground, dead, deceased, starving, and wasting away as he lays out the last bits of his energy, just bursting it out into the cosmos to no real effect. And that's where this story is going to end for this issue. But the real key here is Scott Snyder is a really heavy, wordy writer when it comes to these situations. He might give out landscapes and things associated. He might give out keys for what he wants to see inside the scenes, but there's a lot of heavy dialogue. You would consider him a really heavy expositor. His books always tend to come with a lot of words and a lot of explanations that are going to give people a lot of information, a lot to digest. They need to be read multiple times in order for everything to kind of sink in, and this is no exception, especially with the explanation of the fifth dimension, the sixth dimension, and how everything is really going to work. The real key, as much as Scott Snyder is a driver of these ideas, the representation of these ideas by Jorge Jimenez is just second to none. This has to be one of the most beautiful comic books when it comes to any kind of superhero setup inside the DC universe. Jorge Jimenez is second to none. He draws a phenomenal Superman. He's got a great Batman. His Wonder Woman is top-notch. His just representation of all these characters, especially when you combine them with a colorist, it blew my mind, especially that double-page spread with Perpetua and the whole explanation of the sixth dimension in relation to the multiverse. It was just amazing. So the Justice League is easily one of the greatest driving forces inside DC's cosmic landscape, and it's required reading for people that want to know what's going to be coming up inside the future, or at least understand how the universe is changing with every single issue. It might not necessarily be for everybody, but for a lot of people, you're going to get a lot of mileage out of this. But I want to know what you guys think, so hit me up in the comments down below and we can start that conversation. As always, if you like what you see, hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe to get more news, reviews, and commentary on comic books and everything else.